The iron gates of the Yun palace closed behind me like a tomb sealing shut. I adjusted my veil with trembling fingers, forcing my breathing to steady. Every servant who passed bowed low, seeing only what I wanted them to see, a fragile noblewoman from the fallen Jin kingdom, a peace offering wrapped in silk and lies. They didn't see Ren Yi, the surviving twin prince. They didn't see the blade hidden beneath my robes or the hatred burning in my chest like a funeral pyre that would never die. "The general awaits you in the eastern wing," a eunuch announced, his voice thin and lifeless. "General Han Li, the man who destroyed everything, the man who executed my brother Yan during the war, then had the audacity to accept this marriage as if my twin's blood wasn't still fresh on his hands." I followed the eunuch through corridors lined with red lanterns, each step measured and feminine. I'd practiced this walk for months in exile, small steps, lowered eyes, hands folded delicately. My sister-in-law had taught me before she took poison, whispering instructions through her tears and rage. "Make him love you," she'd said, her dying words a curse and a blessing. "Then destroy him from the inside." I intended to do exactly that. The palace doors opened and I saw him for the first time, tall, broad-shouldered, his face carved from stone and discipline. Han Li stood by the window in full military regalia, his general's uniform perfect, his expression unreadable as winter. Our eyes met through my veil, neither of us spoke. Two enemies bound by an emperor's command, neither knowing how deep this trap would go, how completely we would destroy each other. Hanley circled me slowly, his boots echoing on the marble floor like a death march. I kept my head bowed, playing the obedient consort perfectly, though my fingers itched for the blade strapped to my thigh. "Remove your veil," he commanded, his voice deep and controlled. My heart slammed against my ribs. Too soon, I wasn't ready, but refusal would raise suspicion and suspicion would end everything before it began. I lifted the silk slowly, revealing only my face. I'd practiced this too, softening my features, keeping my jaw relaxed, my eyes downcast and demure. Yan and I were identical twins, mirror images of each other, but I'd learned to blur the edges to become someone gentler, more fragile. Hanley studied me for a long moment that felt like an eternity. Something flickered in his dark eyes, pain, perhaps, or recognition, but it vanished as quickly as winter breath. "You look like someone I once knew," he said quietly, and I heard the ghosts in his voice. My blood froze. Did he suspect? But no, he turned away, dismissing the thought like dust. "The Emperor expects heirs eventually," he continued, voice flat and emotionless. "But I won't touch you until you're comfortable. Consider this marriage a formality, nothing more." Relief and fury warred inside me. He thought he was being merciful. He thought he could ease his guilt by being gentle with his dead lover's sister. "As you wish, General," I whispered, voice soft and broken, exactly as I'd practiced for months. He nodded once and left me alone in chambers far too large, far too cold, filled with the ghosts of everything he'd taken from me. I waited until his footsteps faded completely, then removed the rest of my disguise in private, staring at my reflection in the polished bronze mirror. Yan's face stared back at me, my face, his face, identical in every way. "I'll make him pay," I promised the ghost in the mirror, my voice raw with rage. "I swear on your grave, brother, I'll make him suffer as you suffered." The first week passed in careful observation and calculated performance. I mapped the palace corridors, identified potential allies and dangerous enemies, and played the perfect grieving noblewoman with precision. Han Li barely spoke to me during those early days. He left before dawn for military training and returned after dark, always smelling of sweat and steel and discipline. But on the seventh night, everything changed in a single whispered word. I was preparing for bed, removing the pins from my elaborate hairstyle when I heard it, a low murmur from the adjoining chamber where Han Li slept. His voice, rough with sleep and dreams, speaking a name I knew too well. "Yan." I froze completely, silk robe slipping from my fingers. My heart hammered against my ribs as I crept closer to the partition, pressing my ear against the carved wood, barely breathing. "Yan, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." His voice broke like shattered glass, and I heard the sound of sheets rustling, as if he were reaching desperately for someone who wasn't there, who would never be there again. My brother's name, spoken with such raw anguish, such desperate longing that it made my chest ache even through the hatred. Rage exploded through me like wildfire. How dare he mourn the man he killed? How dare he speak my brother's name like a prayer when his hands were stained red with Yan's blood? I pressed my fist against my mouth to keep from screaming, to keep from storming through that door and plunging my blade into his treacherous heart. But I couldn't, not yet, not until he suffered properly, completely, utterly. This was worse than indifference. This was torture, knowing the man who destroyed my family dreamed of Yan, loved him, mourned him with every breath. The hatred that had brought me to this cursed palace solidified into something sharper, more focused, more dangerous. I would make him suffer as Yan had suffered. I would make him love me with that same desperate intensity, then rip that love away and watch him break. Just as he'd done to my brother. Henley began training me in court etiquette the next morning, and I forced myself to be the perfect student. He was patient, surprisingly gentle, guiding my hands through the proper tea ceremony with careful touches, correcting my posture with a gentleness that made my skin crawl. "Your brother would have been proud," he said quietly, watching me pour tea with trembling hands. "Yan always said his family was graceful, that they moved like water." I nearly dropped the teapot at hearing him speak so casually, as if Yan's name wasn't a blade between us, cutting us both. "You knew my brother?" I asked, keeping my voice soft and curious, not accusing. Han Li's jaw tightened visibly. "Yes, before the war destroyed everything." "Were you friends?" Silence stretched between us like a rope pulled taut. Then quietly, "We were more than that." My hands shook so badly I had to set down the teapot. More than friends, more than comrades. The rumors had been true then. Han Li and Yan had been lovers, bound by some secret promise before duty and war tore them apart and left only blood and ashes. "He never mentioned you in his letters," I lied smoothly, testing him, watching his reaction. Pain flashed across Han Li's face, raw and genuine as an open wound. "No, I suppose he wouldn't have, not after everything." He left abruptly, and I sat alone with the tea growing cold, my mind racing with new information. This changed everything. Han Li hadn't just killed an enemy prince, he'd executed his own lover. The betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined, more personal, more cruel. Good, that meant his suffering would be deeper too when I finally destroyed him. I smiled behind my sleeve, already planning my next move, already weaving the web that would trap us both. If Han Li wanted to love a ghost, I'd give him one and make sure it destroyed him completely, utterly, without mercy. Weeks passed like water through fingers. Han Li grew more comfortable around me, more open with each passing day. He started joining me for evening meals, talking about everything except the war that had killed my brother. He taught me calligraphy, laughed softly when I made deliberate mistakes, and sometimes, just sometimes, looked at me with something warm and dangerous flickering in his eyes. I hated it with every fiber of my being. Hated how easy it was to slip into this role of devoted consort. Hated how his rare smiles made something in my chest twist uncomfortably against my will. But I reminded myself constantly, like a mantra, this was the plan: make him care, make him vulnerable, make him love, then strike when it would hurt most. One evening, as we walked through the moonlit garden, Han Li stopped by the lotus pond. Moonlight reflected off the still water, painting everything silver and ghostly. "You remind me of him so much it hurts," he admitted quietly, his voice raw. "Not just your face, though that's identical, the way you tilt your head when you're thinking, the way you argue without arguing, subtle and sharp." I forced tears into my eyes, let them fall visibly. "I miss him every moment, the pain never stops." "Neither does mine." His voice was barely audible, broken. "Every single day I wake up and remember, every night I dream of what I destroyed." He reached out as if to touch my hand, then stopped himself with visible effort. The restraint in his eyes, the desperate longing barely held in check, was exactly what I needed to see. "Tell me about him," I whispered, playing my role perfectly. "Please, no one else will speak of Yan anymore. It's as if he never existed." Han Li's composure cracked like ice. He told me everything then, how they met as young men at a diplomatic summit, how Yan's laughter had filled his world with light, how they'd promised secretly to find peace together after the war ended. "But I failed him utterly," Han Li finished, voice hoarse with grief. "I failed everyone I ever cared about. I let him see my tears, let him think they were for Yan's memory and shared grief. But inside I was calculating coldly. This man was already broken into pieces. All I had to do was push him over the edge and watch him shatter completely. The night it happened, I wasn't prepared for the consequences. I'd been careless, too comfortable in my role after months of playing the delicate consort. I'd forgotten to be cautious, forgotten the danger. I entered our chambers believing Han Li was still at the War Council and began removing the layers that bound my chest flat, the pins that held my elaborate hairstyle in place. The door opened behind me without warning. I spun around, half undressed, my true masculine form exposed. Han Li stood frozen in the doorway, his face shifting rapidly from confusion to shock to something terrible, betrayal so profound it seemed to shatter him where he stood. "You," his voice was raw, broken, barely human, all this time. I grabbed desperately for my robe, but it was too late. He'd seen everything. The masculine line of my shoulders, the flat chest, the absence of feminine curves, the truth I'd hidden for months. "You're not her," Han Li's hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. "You're not Yan's sister at all, you're—" "Yes," I spat, abandoning the soft voice, the gentle mannerisms, everything. "I'm Ren Yi, Yan's twin brother, and I've been lying to you since the day I walked through those cursed gates." The pain in his eyes should have satisfied me, should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like I'd stabbed myself through the heart. "Why?" he whispered, and the word held universes of hurt. "Why?" I laughed bitterly, harshly. "You killed my brother, you destroyed my entire family. Did you actually think I'd just accept this marriage, that I'd play your perfect little consort while you mourned the man you murdered?" "I didn't." Han Li stepped forward and I saw the exact moment rage replaced his shock, hot and dangerous. "You tricked me, you infiltrated my home, my bed, my—" He couldn't finish the sentence. His iron composure shattered completely and I saw the violence rising in him like a storm. Han Li lunged with trained precision. I barely dodged, years of secret combat training finally paying off. His fists slammed into the wall where my head had been, cracking the plaster like thunder. "You made me believe," he grabbed for me again, and this time I fought back with everything I had. We crashed through the room like a typhoon, knocking over furniture, shattering expensive vases. Every punch I threw carried months of carefully hidden hatred. Every block he made was powered by betrayal and rage. The fight spilled violently into the courtyard, servants scattering like frightened birds as we tore into each other. "I loved him," Han Li roared, catching my wrist and twisting cruelly. "I loved Yan more than my own worthless life, and you used that against me like a weapon." "You killed him," I slammed my knee into his stomach, breaking free. "You executed him like a common criminal, like he meant nothing." "I had no choice." He grabbed my collar, pulling me close, his face inches from mine, both of us bleeding. "The Emperor ordered it directly. I tried to save him. I tried everything possible." "Liar!" I headbutted him viciously and we both stumbled back, bleeding and furious. We circled each other warily, both panting hard, both desperate. The air between us crackled with violence and something else, something I refused to acknowledge or name. "You want to kill me?" Han Li spread his arms wide, exposing his chest. "Then do it now, end this nightmare." I pulled the blade from my sleeve, the one I'd carried since the day I arrived. My hand shook violently as I pressed it to his throat, feeling his pulse against the steel. "Do it," he repeated, voice dead and empty. "I'm tired of living in this hell anyway." I looked into his eyes and saw the devastating truth. He meant it completely. Han Li wanted to die, had wanted to die since the day he lost Yan. My hand wouldn't move. The blade trembled against his skin but refused to cut, refused to end him. "Coward," he whispered with infinite sadness, then he turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone with my useless weapon and my unraveling plan and the terrible realization that nothing was as simple as I'd believed. Silence fell over the palace like fresh snow, cold and suffocating. Han Li stopped speaking to me entirely, completely. We lived in the same quarters but existed in different worlds, separate universes. He left before I woke and returned after I slept. When we passed in corridors, he looked through me as if I were a ghost, as if I'd never existed at all. The servants whispered constantly. The court noticed everything. Even the Emperor sent careful inquiries about the sudden coldness between the general and his consort, probing for weakness. I told myself this was good, this was what I wanted, his suffering, his isolation, his pain, but the silence gnawed at me like a disease. Every day without his voice felt heavier than the last, more unbearable. I caught myself listening for his footsteps, watching for him during training sessions in the courtyard below. The way he moved, precise, controlled, absolutely deadly, reminded me painfully of Yan. They'd been so different in personality, but in combat they'd shared the same fluid grace, the same deadly beauty. One evening, I found Han Li's personal journal left carelessly open on his desk. I knew I shouldn't read it, knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself from looking. The entries were sparse and military, mostly tactical notes and duty rosters. But scattered throughout were fragments of poetry, love letters never sent, all addressed to Yan in handwriting that trembled with emotion. If I could trade my worthless life for yours, I would do it without any hesitation. Forgive me for being too weak to save you when it mattered. Forgive me for surviving when you couldn't, when you should have lived. I closed the journal with shaking hands, my chest tight. This wasn't the writing of a cold-blooded murderer. This was the writing of a man consumed utterly by grief and guilt, drowning in it. Doubt crept in for the first time since I'd arrived, cold and unwelcome. What if I'd been wrong about everything? What if the truth was more complicated than simple revenge? Henley collapsed during morning training without warning. One moment he was demonstrating advanced sword forms to junior officers, the next he was on his knees, face pale and slick with feverish sweat. I ran before I could think, pushing roughly through the gathered crowd. "Get the physician immediately," I ordered, reverting to my real voice in my panic, my royal voice. The officers stared at me in obvious shock, the quiet consort suddenly commanding like royalty, like a prince. But Han Li's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow and labored, and I didn't care about my disguise anymore. The physician diagnosed severe exhaustion and dangerous fever. "He's been pushing himself far too hard," the old man said gravely, mixing herbs with practiced hands. "His body has finally given out completely." I dismissed everyone forcefully and sat by Han Li's bedside, watching him shiver violently under the blankets. Without his usual armor of composure, he looked younger, more vulnerable, heartbreakingly human. "Yan," he murmured in his delirium, reaching for ghosts. "I'm sorry, so desperately sorry." My throat tightened painfully. "I'm here," I whispered, not knowing which brother I was speaking as anymore. Han Li's fever-bright eyes opened, completely unfocused. "I tried to save you, I sent secret word to surrender early. I begged the Emperor for mercy on my knees, but he wouldn't listen. He wanted blood and vengeance, he wanted." His voice broke into violent coughing. I pressed a cup of water to his cracked lips, supporting his head gently. "I took the blame for everything," he continued desperately, barely audible. "I told everyone I executed you personally to protect." He passed out before finishing the sentence. I sat frozen, the cup forgotten in my trembling hands. Protect who? Protect what? What did he mean? For the first time since arriving at the palace, I wondered if I knew the real truth at all, if everything I believed was built on lies. Han Li's fever lasted 3 agonizing days. I barely left his side, wiping his forehead with cool cloths, forcing medicine between his lips, listening to his delirious confessions that shattered everything I thought I knew. He spoke of secret meetings with Yan before the war escalated, of promises made under moonlight in hidden gardens, of a desperate plan to fake Yan's death and smuggle him to safety in the mountains. But something had gone catastrophically wrong. Someone had betrayed them to the Emperor. "Should have been me on that execution block," Han Li whispered, tears sliding down his temples. "Should have been my head rolling, not yours, never yours." I held his burning hand without thinking, my own eyes burning with unshed tears. This wasn't the confession of a heartless murderer. This was the confession of someone who'd tried to play hero and lost absolutely everything. On the 3rd night, the fever finally broke. Han Li's eyes opened, clear and focused for the first time in days. He found me slumped in the chair beside his bed, still holding his hand like a lifeline. "You stayed," he said, voice rough from disuse and screaming. "You were sick and alone. You could have killed me easily, finished your revenge while I was helpless." I pulled my hand away, suddenly aware of how close we'd become, how the lines had blurred. maybe I still will eventually. But the words rang completely hollow now. Something fundamental had shifted during those 3 days of fevered confessions. The hatred that had sustained me for months was still there, but it was cracked now, letting in confusion and terrible doubt. Hanley sat up slowly, studying my face with those dark, unreadable eyes. You look so much like him it physically hurts to look at you. Good, I said automatically, but my voice lacked any conviction. I loved him, you know, your brother. I loved him more than anything in this entire cursed world. Then why did you kill him? The question came out broken, desperate, pleading. I didn't, Hanley said simply, quietly. But I let everyone believe I did, because the truth would have destroyed something far more important than my honor or my life. Hanley refused to explain further, and it drove me mad. He recovered slowly over the following days, and the distance between us remained, but now it was different, charged with unspoken questions neither of us dared to ask aloud. The Empress Dowager summoned me to her private chambers one afternoon. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, draped in gold silk and dripping with jade, radiating power and dangerous intelligence. Sit down, she commanded, pouring tea with practiced, elegant grace. Tell me, little consort, what game are you playing in my palace? My blood turned to ice water. I don't understand, your highness. Don't insult my intelligence with obvious lies. She sipped her tea with infuriating calm. You're no more a woman than I'm a spring chicken. The only question is, does Hanley know the truth yet? I couldn't breathe properly. How long had she known? Who else had figured it out? Was I already dead? The Empress Dowager smiled at my visible panic. Relax, child, your secret is safe with me, for now at least. What do you want from me? Information and cooperation. Hanley has been acting strangely since you arrived, distracted, weak, emotionally compromised. I need to know if you're a genuine threat to the Empire or just a personal nuisance to one broken general. I'm neither, I lied smoothly. She studied me with ancient, knowing eyes that saw everything. You're Renyi, aren't you? The twin brother everyone believed died with the rest of your family. There was no point denying it anymore. You're extremely well informed. I make it my business to be informed about everything. She set down her cup deliberately. Tell me, Prince Renyi, do you really believe Hanley killed your brother in cold blood? The question stunned me completely. I saw the execution order myself. His signature was clearly on it. Signatures can be forged easily. Orders can be manipulated by clever hands. She leaned forward intently. Did you ever wonder why Hanley fell from grace so quickly after the war ended? Why the emperor stripped him of honors and confined him to this marriage like a punishment? I hadn't questioned it. I'd been too focused on revenge to question the politics surrounding everything. The Empress Dowager's smile turned predatory and knowing. Perhaps you should start wondering about the real truth, young prince. I spent the next week digging frantically through palace records, bribing nervous servants, piecing together fragments of truth like a broken mirror. What I found made my blood run cold with horror. Hanley hadn't signed the execution order at all. The emperor had signed it personally. But Hanley had taken public responsibility afterward, claiming falsely he'd acted on his own authority to end the war quickly and decisively. Why would he do that? Why take the blame for something he didn't do, destroying his own reputation? The answer came from an unexpected source, a former Jin general now serving reluctantly in the Yun army. He found me in the moonlit garden one evening and spoke quietly, urgently, looking over his shoulder constantly. Your brother is alive, Prince Renyi. The world tilted violently. What did you say? Ren Yan lives and breathes. Hanley smuggled him out the night before the scheduled execution. They killed a convicted criminal as a body double. The emperor knows everything, and he's been holding Yan's life over Hanley's head ever since, leverage to keep the general obedient and broken, a perfect puppet. My knees gave out completely. I grabbed the garden wall for support, gasping, where is Yan now? Hidden somewhere safe. But if you continue your revenge against Hanley, the emperor will kill Yan for real this time. That's why Hanley let you infiltrate his household without resistance. He's been protecting you both desperately, hoping you'd give up and leave before you triggered something catastrophic that would get your brother killed. The general left me there alone with the truth that shattered my entire world. Yan was alive. Han Li had saved him at the cost of everything, and I'd been trying to destroy the one person who'd kept my brother breathing. I ran back to our chambers, burst through the door wildly. Han Li was at his desk, writing reports calmly. He looked up, completely unsurprised by my tears. "You know now," he said quietly with resignation. "Why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning? Would you have believed me, or would you have thought it was another manipulation, another lie?" I couldn't answer because he was absolutely right. I would have called him a liar and continued my revenge. "Where is Yan?" I demanded desperately. "Safe, that's all you need to know for his protection." "I need to see him." "No." Hanley stood, his voice turning hard as iron. "The Emperor has spies everywhere, watching everything. One wrong move and Yan dies horribly. I've kept him alive this long by staying silent, by taking the Emperor's punishments, by accepting this mockery of a marriage. Don't ruin it now with impatience." I stared at him, this man I'd hated with every fiber of my being, this man I'd tried to destroy, and saw him clearly for the first time. Not a villain, not a murderer, just someone who'd sacrificed absolutely everything for love. "I'm so sorry," I whispered brokenly. "I'm desperately sorry for everything." Hanley turned away from me. "Your apologies mean nothing now, just stop making things worse than they already are." The revelation changed everything and nothing simultaneously. I still lived in Han Li's chambers, still played the role of consort in public, but now crushing guilt consumed me instead of hatred. I tried to make amends in small, pathetic ways, ensuring his meals were warm, maintaining his uniforms perfectly, standing by his side during tedious court functions. He accepted these gestures with cold politeness, never acknowledging the shift between us. But I noticed things now that I'd missed completely before. The way Han Li always positioned himself between me and potential threats. How he deflected the Emperor's dangerous attention away from our household. The letters he burned immediately after reading, coded messages, I realized now, probably from Yan in hiding. One night I found the courage to speak honestly. "Let me help you." Han Li didn't look up from his military reports. "Help with what exactly?" "Protecting Yan. Whatever plan you have, let me be part of it, please." "Absolutely not. He's my brother. And you almost destroyed everything I've built to keep him safe." Han Li's voice was sharp as broken glass. "Your revenge nearly killed him. The Emperor has been watching our household closely since your arrival. Every time you challenge me, every time you slip from your role, you put Yan at terrible risk." The accusation hit like a physical blow to the chest. He was completely right. My hatred had been a weapon pointed directly at my own brother's heart. "Then tell me what to do," I pleaded desperately. "Let me fix this somehow." Henley finally looked at me, his eyes tired and ancient beyond his years. "You can't fix this, Renyi. The damage is already done. Just try not to make it worse." But I couldn't accept that. I'd been so focused on destroying Han Li that I'd never considered he might be the only thing keeping my family alive. The Emperor summoned us to court without warning. The moment we entered the throne room, I knew something was catastrophically wrong. The atmosphere was too tense, the officials too quiet, watching us like vultures. "General Han Li," the Emperor's voice dripped with false warmth, "how delightful that you've brought your lovely consort." Han Li bowed deeply with practiced precision. I followed his lead exactly, keeping my head lowered submissively. "There have been interesting rumors circulating," the Emperor continued, descending from his throne like a predator. "Whispers about your household, about your consort's unusual behavior, about secret meetings in the dead of night." My blood froze solid. Beside me, Han Li remained perfectly, unnaturally still. The Emperor circled us slowly like a shark. "Some say your consort is not what she appears to be. Some say the general harbors dangerous traitors in his home. What do you say to these serious accusations?" "Baseless rumors, Your Majesty," Han Li replied smoothly, mechanically. "My consort is simply a grieving woman from a fallen kingdom, nothing more." "Then you won't mind if we verify this claim?" The Emperor snapped his fingers sharply. Guards stepped forward menacingly. "Remove the consort's veil immediately. Let the entire court see her face clearly." This was it, the moment I dreaded since arriving. If they examined me closely under bright light, they'd see the truth instantly. My disguise couldn't withstand direct scrutiny. But Han Li moved faster than thought itself. Your Majesty, please, my consort is extremely shy, completely unused to public attention. Such humiliation would. Are you refusing an imperial command? The emperor's voice turned deadly cold. Han Li dropped to his knees instantly. I would never refuse your majesty, but I beg for mercy, my consort has done nothing wrong. The emperor smiled, and it was absolutely terrifying. Then prove it, tonight, bring your consort to the imperial banquet, let everyone see her clearly, let us celebrate the peace she represents. It was a trap, a test, and we both knew it perfectly. We left the throne room in tense silence. Once back in our chambers, Han Li paced like a caged animal, radiating barely controlled panic. We're running out of time, he muttered desperately. The emperor knows something, someone talked. What do we do? Han Li stopped, looked at me with sudden, terrible intensity. Tonight, at the banquet, you'll need to be absolutely perfect, more feminine than ever before, no mistakes if they discover the truth. They'll kill us both, I finished quietly. No, they'll kill Yan, you and I are bargaining chips. Yan is the secret the emperor is really hunting. My brother, always my brother at the center of this nightmare. I won't let that happen, I swore fiercely. Han Li's expression softened slightly. I know, that's the only reason I'm trusting you now. I spent the afternoon preparing with trembling hands. The palace sent servants to help me dress, an honor that was really surveillance. They painted my face with thick powder, lined my eyes with dark kohl, dressed me in layers of silk so heavy I could barely move or breathe. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself anymore. I looked like an elaborate doll, artificial and fragile. Han Li appeared in the doorway, dressed in formal military regalia. For a moment, we just stared at each other, two prisoners preparing for execution. Stay close to me, he instructed quietly. Don't speak unless directly addressed. If anyone asks personal questions, defer to me. I understand. And Ren Yi, he used my real name for the first time since the revelation. Thank you for trying. The banquet hall glittered with 1,000 lanterns. Officials and nobles filled the space, all eyes turning to watch as Han Li and I entered. Whispers followed us like knives. The emperor sat at the head table, his smile sharp. General, come sit beside me, bring your lovely consort. We had no choice. I walked with measured steps, head high but eyes downcast, every movement carefully feminine. Han Li's hand rested at the small of my back, a husband's gesture but also a warning. Stay in character, stay alive. The evening crawled by, course after course arrived while I barely touched the food, too terrified to eat. Officials approached with questions disguised as compliments, probing for weakness. Your consort is quite quiet, one minister observed, unusual for Jin nobility. She grieves her family, Han Li replied smoothly. The war took much from her. Indeed, including her brother, I hear, the infamous Prince Ren Yan. My fingers tightened on my chopsticks. Han Li's hand found mine under the table, a silent command, stay calm. A tragedy, Han Li agreed, but such is war. The emperor watched our exchange with glittering eyes. Tell me, Lady Ren, do you blame the general for your loss? Everyone fell silent. The question was a blade aimed at both our throats. I raised my eyes to meet the emperor's gaze, letting calculated tears well up. I blame the war, Your Majesty, not the general. He was merely a soldier following orders, just as my brother was. How forgiving, the emperor murmured. How very convenient. The trap sprung an hour later. The emperor called for entertainment, dancers, musicians, and then, with casual cruelty, a demonstration of swordsmanship. General Han Li, perhaps you would honor us with a display. The emperor's smile was poisonous. And perhaps your consort would assist. I hear Jin nobility are trained in the martial arts as well. This was it, the final test. If I refused, suspicion would cement. If I agreed and failed to perform femininely enough, they'd know. Han Li stood bowing. My consort is not trained in combat, Your Majesty, perhaps another volunteer. Nonsense, I insist. The emperor's tone left no room for argument. I rose on shaking legs. Han Li led me to the center of the hall where servants cleared space. Someone handed him a training sword and he passed it to me. Our eyes met, and in that moment an entire conversation happened in silence. Trust me, his eyes said. I gripped the sword, letting it wobble in my hands as if too heavy. Hanli moved to correct my stance, and under the guise of instruction he whispered urgently, "Follow my lead, let me guide every movement." The demonstration began. Hanli moved with his usual grace and I followed clumsily, deliberately awkward. He corrected my grip, adjusted my footwork, essentially puppeteering my movements. To the watching court, it looked like a patient husband teaching his unskilled wife. But then disaster struck. Another official, eager to impress, joined the demonstration and aimed a strike at me harder than necessary, faster than expected. Pure instinct took over. I blocked with proper form, countered with a move that was unmistakably male, trained, deadly. The hall went silent. The emperor leaned forward, eyes gleaming. How interesting, perhaps your consort is more skilled than you claimed, General. Han Li's face remained impassive, but I saw the flash of panic in his eyes. We'd been caught. Before he could respond, chaos erupted. The doors burst open and soldiers flooded in, led by a commander I didn't recognize. Your Majesty, emergency. The northern garrison reports rebellion. The emperor's attention snapped away from us. What? Jin's survivors have amassed an army. They're marching toward the capital. My heart stopped. Jin survivors, could it be? The emperor stood, fury replacing his calculated cruelty. General Han Li, take your forces and crush this rebellion, immediately. Your Majesty. Now. The banquet descended into chaos as officials scattered, soldiers mobilized. In the confusion, Han Li grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the exit. This is our chance, he hissed. The emperor will be distracted, we need to move. Move where? To Yan, we're getting your brother and leaving this empire before it burns. We fled through servant corridors, Han Li navigating with practiced ease. He'd clearly planned this route before, waiting for an opportunity. The rebellion, I gasped, struggling to keep pace. Is it real? I don't know, but real or not, it's bought us time. He pulled me into a hidden passage behind the kitchens. Yan has been hiding in a monastery 3 days' ride north. We need horses, supplies. General Han Li, a voice echoed behind us. Guards, they'd noticed our absence. Han Li cursed and pulled me faster. We emerged in the stable yards where he quickly saddled 2 horses. The sounds of pursuit grew louder. Go, Han Li commanded, boosting me onto a horse. Ride north, follow the river, I'll draw them away. No, I grabbed his arm, we go together. For a moment, something vulnerable flashed in his eyes, then he nodded and mounted his own horse. We burst from the stables into the night, guards shouting behind us. Arrows whistled past as we galloped through the palace gates, the city blurring around us. But we didn't make it far. A battalion waited beyond the city walls, torches burning like fallen stars. We were surrounded. The commander approached, face grim. General Han Li, you're under arrest for treason and harboring fugitives. Surrender now and your execution will be quick. Han Li positioned his horse between me and the soldiers. Let the consort go, this isn't her fight. I'm afraid it is. The emperor himself rode forward, flanked by his personal guard. You see, General, we've known about your little deception for quite some time. The question was never if you'd betrayed us, but when you'd finally make your move. You knew. Han Li's voice was hollow. About Prince Ren Yan's survival? Yes. About his twin brother infiltrating our palace? Yes, I allowed it, because watching you squirm has been endlessly entertaining. The emperor smiled. But now the game is over, you've proven yourself a traitor, the penalty is death. They dragged us back to the palace in chains. Han Li didn't resist, didn't fight. He'd known this moment would come eventually. They threw us into the palace dungeons, separate cells, close enough to hear each other but not touch. I pressed against the bars, trying to see him. Han Li. I'm here, his voice came from the darkness, steady despite everything. I'm sorry, this is my fault. If I hadn't come here, then Yan would still be hiding and I'd still be the emperor's loyal dog. Maybe this was always how it would end. Footsteps echoed, guards appeared, dragging Han Li from his cell. He didn't resist, didn't even look at me as they hauled him away. Where are you taking him? I screamed, rattling my chains. No one answered. The dungeon fell silent except for my ragged breathing and the sound of my own useless fury. They brought him back hours later, barely conscious, his face swollen and bloodied. They'd tortured him trying to extract information about Yan's location. I didn't tell them, Han Li whispered through broken lips. I'll never tell them. You should, I said desperately. Save yourself, please. He laughed, a horrible wet sound. And let them kill the only good thing I ever did. No, Yan lives, that's all that matters. 3 days passed, 3 days of listening to them torture Han Li in the chamber above my cell, 3 days of his screams, his silence, his refusal to break. On the 4th day they brought a letter, smuggled by a sympathetic guard who I'd bribed with a promise of gold I didn't have. My hands shook as I read Han Li's cramped handwriting. Renyi, if you're reading this, I'm likely dead. Don't mourn me. I deserve this for every life I took in war, every order I followed blindly. But please find Yan, tell him I kept my promise, tell him I loved him until the end. Tell him to live freely, to be happy, to never look back at this empire of ashes. You have his face. Maybe that will bring him comfort when I can't. Li. I folded the letter against my chest and wept. The execution was set for dawn. They paraded Han Li through the palace courtyard, his hands bound, his head unbowed despite the bruises and cuts covering his body. The entire court gathered to watch, eager for blood and spectacle. I was brought out in chains, forced to witness. The emperor wanted me to see what happened to traitors, to anyone who defied him. Han Li's eyes found mine across the crowded courtyard. Even broken and bleeding, there was no fear in his gaze, only a strange, peaceful acceptance. General Han Li, the emperor announced, you have been found guilty of treason, harboring enemies of the state and deceiving your emperor. The penalty is death by execution. Do you have any final words? Han Li turned to face the crowd, his voice clear and strong despite everything. I regret nothing. Every choice I made for love. That's worth more than any empire. His eyes found mine again. Tell Yan I kept my promise. The executioner raised his sword. I screamed, lunging against my chains, but it was useless. The blade fell with terrible finality. I watched the man who'd saved my brother, who'd sacrificed everything, who'd loved us both more than his own life. I watched him die. And something inside me died with him. They released me 3 days after the execution. The emperor had no more use for me. I was broken, no longer a threat, just another ghost haunting the palace. I stumbled through the empty corridors, past the chambers we'd shared, past the garden where we'd walked. Everything felt hollow, meaningless. A messenger found me in the ruins of our room. Prince Renyi, I have urgent news. Your brother Prince Renyan, he's been found. My heart lurched. Where is he safe? He's at the northern monastery, but you should know, he's very ill. The years in hiding have taken their toll. He's asking for Han Li. I rode north immediately, pushing my horse to its limits. The monastery sat in the mountains, peaceful and remote. Monks led me to a small room where Yan lay, thin and pale, barely recognizable. Brother, I whispered, kneeling beside his bed. Yan's eyes opened and for a moment he smiled. Then he saw my face, saw the grief written there. Where's Li? He promised he'd come. My throat closed. Yan, he's gone. He died protecting us. He died keeping his promise to you. Yan's face crumpled. No, he can't be. He promised we'd be together when this was over, he promised. He broke into violent coughing, and I held him as he wept, both of us drowning in grief for the man who'd saved us at the cost of everything. Yan survived another month before his illness took him. His last words were Han Li's name, whispered like a prayer. I buried my brother beside a waterfall he would have loved, in a place far from the empire that had destroyed us all. Then I returned to the capital one final time. The Empress Dowager found me in the palace gardens, standing where Han Li and I had once walked. The emperor's reign is crumbling. She said quietly, the rebellion was real. Jin's survivors are taking back what was stolen. Soon there will be a new empire. I don't care, I said honestly. You should, they want you to lead them. Prince Renyi, last of the Jin royal line. I laughed bitterly. I destroyed everything I touched. I'm no leader. You loved him, didn't you? She asked gently. Han Li, somewhere along the way you fell for him. I couldn't answer. Couldn't admit that she was right, that hatred had turned to obsession, obsession to understanding, understanding to something deeper. That I'd destroyed the only man who'd ever truly loved my family, loved me with his whole broken heart. "He left something for you," she said, handing me a small wooden box. "He asked me to keep it safe, to give it to you if he died." Inside was a letter and a jade pendant, the mate to one Yan had always worn. The letter was simple. "Renyi, I know you hate me, I understand why, but know this, I never stopped loving your brother, and somewhere in our twisted game I started caring for you too, not because you look like him but because you're brave and fierce and impossible. I hope you find peace, I hope you find someone who deserves you, be happy, that's all I ever wanted for both of you. Lee." I clutched the pendant until it cut into my palm, until I bled, and finally let myself admit the truth I'd been running from. I'd fallen in love with Han Li, and I'd killed him for it. The empire fell within the year, the emperor was overthrown, his palace burned. The Jin survivors wanted to rebuild, wanted me to lead them into a new era. But I couldn't, I was too broken, too consumed by guilt and grief and the ghost of a man who'd loved me despite everything. I left the capital and wandered, a ghost among ghosts. Sometimes I'd stop in small villages and hear stories, tales of the tragic General Han Li who died for love. They made him a legend, a martyr, a hero. They didn't know the truth, that he died because I'd been too blind, too consumed by revenge to see what was right in front of me. Years passed, I grew older but felt ancient. Then one day an old scholar found me in a mountain temple where I'd been living in isolation. "Prince Renyi," he wheezed, dying himself, "I must tell you the truth before I die, about Han Li, about the execution." "I know the truth," I said wearily. "No you don't," he coughed violently. "Han Li never killed Prince Ren Yan. The execution order was forged by the Empress Regent. She wanted to start the war to seize power. Han Li discovered this and saved your brother, but the Emperor used that knowledge to control him for years. Everything, the marriage, the torture, the execution, it was all the Emperor punishing him for being too good, too honorable." The world tilted. What? Han Li was innocent of everything. He died protecting a secret that would have brought down the Emperor. He died a hero and everyone believed he was a traitor. The scholar died moments later, leaving me with the truth I'd been too late to learn. Han Li had never betrayed anyone. He'd been the victim all along and I'd helped destroy him. I returned to the capital one final time. The new empire had built a memorial for the fallen and I'd requested one addition, a grave for General Han Li, even though his body had been burned by the old emperor. I knelt before the empty grave, placing the jade pendant on the stone. "You were the only one who never betrayed me," I whispered. "You tried to save us all and I repaid you with suspicion and hate. The obsession that had driven me, the love I'd denied, it all felt like poison now, eating me from the inside." "I'm sorry," I said to the stone, to the ghost, to the memory of the man I'd destroyed. "I'm sorry I was too blind to see. I'm sorry I couldn't save you the way you saved us. I'm sorry I didn't tell you I loved you before it was too late." I never left that grave. The caretakers would find me there every day, talking to the stone, leaving flowers, whispering apologies to a ghost who couldn't hear them. The new empire thrived without me. They built monuments to Han Li, finally understanding what he'd sacrificed. His name became synonymous with honor, with love, with tragic devotion. But I knew the full truth. I knew that I'd helped kill him, that my revenge had been built on lies, that I'd fallen in love with him too late to save either of us. One morning, as cherry blossoms fell like blood-stained snow, the caretaker found me slumped against the gravestone, finally at peace. My last words whispered into the wind. "Lee, wait for me." They buried me beside the empty grave, two ghosts finally together. The inscription read, "Here lies Prince Renyi, who destroyed the only man who truly loved him and spent the rest of his life learning what love really means." The empire remembered us as a tragic tale, a story of love, betrayal, obsession, and the devastating cost of revenge. They didn't know that every night in my dreams I still heard his voice whispering my brother's name, then mine, with equal tenderness and sorrow. I'd wanted to destroy General Han Li, instead I'd destroyed myself, and somehow that felt like exactly what I deserved.